With the final results announced by the South African Electoral Commission, the ruling African National Congress will have to share power with other parties. President Cyril Ramaphosa's ANC party won just over 40% of the vote in Wednesday's election, losing its long-held supremacy in South African politics. The Democratic Alliance, the principal opposition party, received 21.63% of that vote, while Umkhonto we Sizwe MK, a recently formed party headed by former President and ANC leader Jacob Zuma, garnered 14.71% of the vote, displacing votes for the ANC. Opposition parties have hailed the result as a momentous breakthrough for a country struggling with deep poverty and inequality, but the ANC remains the biggest party in some way.
Distinguished guests, fellow South Africans, ladies and gentlemen, after carefully considering the extensive measures put in place and acknowledging the provisions of Section 57(3) of the Electoral Act 1998, the Electoral Commission of South Africa declares the results of the 2024 national and provincial elections as free and fair. This moment is a triumph for our democracy, a victory for the principles of transparency, a measure that we can reflect on even as we take stock of accountability and the rule of law in our land. Let us celebrate this achievement while remaining vigilant, for the work of strengthening democracy is one that truly never ends. Together, we must continue to build a nation that serves as a beacon of hope, a shining example of what can be achieved when the power of the people is harnessed for greater good.
And now let's have Arise Director of News, Sumner Sambo, talk to us about the elections. He's been in SA during the week. We'll talk about the elections and the outcome. Good to have you, Sumner, on AA. Yeah. Yes. So the African National Congress suffered a steep fall, just 40.18%. That's a huge drop from the 57.5% it took the previous elections in 2019. Yeah. The party was once led by anti-apartheid figurehead, which is Nelson Mandela. This means the people have taken the power into their hands. It's an interesting time in South Africa. Can you explain the process to us?
Yeah, I mean, these elections have actually shown the underbelly of the ANC and how massive poverty in the country and challenges facing the economy continue to make a lot of South Africans to be angry with the government. And the governing party has lost out in this election. And in this instance now, we've seen the governing party lose out from about 57.something%, roughly 58% to about 40.18%. And of course, losing 71 seats. It has 159 seats right now in the National Parliament out of 400 seats. And so this has given rise to parties like MK, led by former President Jacob Zuma, who is still coincidentally in the ANC, but he's a leader of the MK, and it's very, very interesting indeed. And then you have also the DA, the Democratic Alliance, which has been the official opposition, inching closer this time around. They've actually had some wins compared to last elections, having about 21% of the results. So this actually shows that democracy is growing, and as President Cyril Ramaphosa, not quite long ago, while the results were being released, actually made a joke that people have actually set their minds, and so this time around the political parties have no choice than to listen. And what the South Africans are saying, that they do not want only one political party to rule them this time around. All politicians should come together and actually give them a government that works for them. And so that's why with these results now, nobody has inched closer to 50%. So they must go into a coalition now. So it's either you go into a coalition between ANC and the DA, which is unlikely because John Steenhuisen, who is actually the DA leader, says having the ANC and the DA going to a coalition is like oil and water, that they don't mix together. And so there are talks of an EFF and the MK having an alliance with ANC, but people are saying that that could actually be a time bomb, because the DA is now saying that it will fight against such an alliance, because if these three come together, then of course it looks like the white minority in the country may actually go down. It will be pretty difficult for them. So it's a very difficult situation for the ANC, having been in power for 30 years. And they've never gone into coalition, but this time around, they must actually go into coalition by getting partners. So where will those partners come from? Well, there are still other smaller political parties, and we hope to see what goes on.
Interesting. So what does the future of South Africa elections look like, you know, being that these results being announced? And to also merge that with the 50% requirement, how quick can they get that result in so that they can have a functioning government?
So the South African parties actually have 14 days from now. That's 2 weeks to be able to couple up, couple together a government. And so it's left to be seen if Cyril Ramaphosa will be able to rally around his party leaders to be able to see how they can, you know, get proper alliance, so that they don't go into an alliance that will break down on the way too. And there are some of the other political parties like MK and the EFF who are saying that if they are to go into alliance talks with the ANC, then Cyril Ramaphosa must not be part of that conversation. He must step down. But the ANC spokesman, Fikile, earlier today, General Secretary Amin, actually said that that is a no-go area, that if any of the political party wants to have a talk with the ANC, the issue of Cyril Ramaphosa stepping down is a no-go area. So Cyril Ramaphosa remains the president according to them, and they are the ones who will determine who and who to go into the coalition, not the smaller political parties, because they have 40.18%, and the DA 21%, and the MK 14%. The EFF comes at 9-point-something%. But in all of this, we're waiting to see how they will couple all of this together, because the ANC, I think, National Executive Committee will be meeting on Tuesday to review the outcome of the elections, but it's left to President Ramaphosa to see how he can actually unite his party leaders, because there are talks actually within the ANC for his leadership to be questioned, that he hasn't led the ANC well, he hasn't delivered in government, and so if he hasn't delivered so much in government and South African voters are angry and they've punished the ANC, then of course he needs to step out of the conversation. So it's left to be seen.
I'm wondering how the merger of these parties would help democracy in that country, and why that particular law is in place.
Well, this is the beauty of democracy, parliamentary democracy, because once you can't get the overall majority, you would have to be forced into going into alliance talks. And when you're going into coalition talks here, you would have to give and take. So it has 159 seats. The DA has 87 seats in parliament. MK has 58, and the EFF has 39. Well, the other one that is left is IFP, the Inkatha Freedom Party. It has 17 seats. And if the ANC is able to talk its way into the IFP, led by former Minister Buthelezi, who actually died. He was also one of the heroes, anti-apartheid heroes, who died not quite long ago. It could actually see how it can get into an alliance with that, and maybe talk with the EFF, and of course they will now see how they work with other political parties, like the Good Party. In the last government, the Good Party actually had a minister that was brought into the government to bolster the ANC's performance. But this time around, it's left to be seen actually how the ANC can couple this together, because if you look at where MK won, they won in KwaZulu-Natal and other places where you have a huge chunk of Zulu people. So this outcome of the elections were a bit more tribalistic. Lots of Zulu people wanting to go with Jacob Zuma, because Jacob Zuma claims that he was actually tainted with the corruption scandals, that he's not guilty and all of that. But of course, other parts of the country are being careful. And the DA, which is business driven, which is a group of people who actually are forward looking. And then, of course, we have the white minority dominating that party, are saying that, look, they will be working with other political parties actually to upturn the ANC's 40%. So if the DA is actually able to use its 21% to work with the MK and then to work with the IFP and EFF, then
even after the
votes, ANC may be in minority actually.
Even after the votes?
Yeah. The ANC could actually be in minority, having 40%. Because, I mean, if you remove the 40% that they have right now, 40.18%. You add up all the other political parties, I mean, they could actually form a government and the ANC will be a minority, despite having the largest chunk of the vote. So it's a difficult time for the ANC. This is the first time that they will have to face this. But the beauty of parliamentary democracy is that you always have friends, allies here and there. And there are elders within the South African society that will call all the parties together and say, look, let's form a government. But if in 14 days they are unable to couple together a government, then there will be a political crisis in the country.
So let's look at what stood out during the elections for you. Is there anything that other African countries can replicate from the South African election?
Yes, I mean, several of them. First of all, there's the special vote, which is for policemen, the IEC officials, that's Electoral Commission officials, prisoners, people who are in hospitals and all of that, journalists, including like me, who vote 2 days before election day. So you are allowed to go and vote in those 2 days before the main election day. So on Monday and Tuesday, lots of people who are incarcerated, who are in hospitals, and journalists, policemen, soldiers, and all of that, who will be busy on election day or who have other things to do, are allowed to go and vote on that day. And so they went. Some of the IEC officials actually visited people in hospitals. So it's something that we can actually take, especially us in Nigeria here, because I haven't voted, I mean, since 2003 when I voted last, because on election day I'm always on duty. You are on duty and others too, policemen and all of that, INEC and all of that. So it's one of the beauty of democracies. If you can copy that, then there's diaspora voting, where South Africans who are registered abroad can actually vote at the embassies and all of that of South African high commissions and all of that. And then the other one is that they allowed independent candidates. So if you don't want to belong to a political party, you can actually join, go get some signatures and all of that, and you will be an independent candidate and stand without becoming part of any political party. And then the other one is that they actually allow you, before, South Africans were allowed to vote anywhere that they feel like on election day, but this time around they conscripted it to say that you would have to vote in a particular place, but you must tell the Electoral Commission where you're going to be in, I think, about 2 weeks. So that you won't just vote anywhere, unlike it used to be before. So these are some of the things that we can copy very well. And they have an electoral court specially dedicated to resolving electoral matters. These are the things that other African countries can learn, establish a court, so that you don't have a situation like, for example, in Nigeria, when an election is over, all other courts suffer because it's the justices and judges from all other courts that are brought in to serve as election tribunal judges. So those who have other cases that are not election related, it will be difficult for them to be able to have their cases heard. But in this instance, you have a special court for electoral matters, and it takes care of all these issues within and outside the electoral period.
Wow. Another thing I'd like you to touch on is the issue of violence during an election. You know, we see that here sometimes, and inconclusivity of elections. Did we have that there? How smooth were the elections? Yeah,
well, the elections were actually non-violent, though there were some areas of ballot box snatching in some areas, like for example in Limpopo there was an IEC official who's the IEC area manager who took away a box without the police accompanying him, and when some of the voters raised an alarm, he had to drop the box and then he ran away before the police came and picked the box with some ballot papers inside. Apart from that, and there may be some of the statement made by Jacob Zuma, the MK leader, who's saying that if the results are released as they were just a few moments ago, that the IEC will be provoking them. Well, the Minister of Police Affairs, Sele, actually warned that anybody who has an issue should actually take it to the electoral court and not provoke South Africans into going into violence because of the election outcome, because South Africans are not known to protest against election results and all of that. These are some of the issues that wanted to crop up. And then, of course, those aggrieved political parties, I think about 26 of them plus the MK who are aggrieved, are warned actually to stay away from violence, follow the laws and all of that. But generally, we didn't have that, and there were no issues of inconclusive election. But Jacob Zuma had wanted that to happen, saying that he was demanding election rerun, that based on the results that have trickled in, that the ANC did not even have up to 40.18% that well, I mean that the IEC had declared. So well, there are no proof for now until those proof, maybe if they have any, are made available to the election court. But the beauty of the South African electoral system is that it's smooth. Lots of people go out, and unlike us here, when there was a problem with the manual vote, with the voting system, unlike us that will have to wait for INEC at the center to actually announce using beavers and all of that. This time around, some of the presiding officers went ahead and used manual system without the Electoral Commission giving an order. It was way up until 9 p.m. that the Electoral Commissioner gave an order. So, and I was wondering myself, and I asked, how could this happen? They said, well, it's their system. And you could see the Electoral Commission chairperson actually on election day with the president, helping him when he came to actually vote. And I was surprised myself, because on election day, if you see the INEC chairman with the president who is actually a candidate, I mean, lots of people will read meanings into that.
So the 15 days you said that they have to
14
days. What do you see panning out? And like you said, they usually don't have protests after elections. Do you see that happening? Just like you said, if the other parties, MK, the DN and all, come together to form a 60, do you foresee any politics playing out within this 14 days period?
Yeah, I mean, this is the highest level of politics that you see now in South Africa, because the ANC, which we didn't want to actually sit with some of these parties on the same table, will now be forced to actually sit with these political parties and talk. So you have to give some positions in government. So you will say, for example, I'll give you some ministerial positions if you bring these votes and these seats and all of that. So it will be give and take way up until they are able to get above 50. That's 50 plus 1 to now make it, you know, a government to be able to meet the electoral requirements. But if they don't and they feel so, you know, high-handed about it, then they could actually go into minority. But the spokesman, ANC spokesman, not quite long ago, actually said that they are also not afraid of going into minority. That if all the other political parties gang up against them and they are able to raise more than 50 plus 1, that they are happy to go into opposition. But I don't think he was speaking for the majority of the party leaders, because being in government since 1994, I mean, it has really taught them some experience, and this is where the likes of former President Thabo Mbeki will be called, his experience will be called to play, and others, to see how they can sit down on the table and think of South Africa first before any other political party.
Well, interesting times for South Africa. Thank you so much, Sumner Sambo, for coming on Arise America. Arise Director of News, Sumner Sambo there.